Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Mason. I am the Director of Programs for Aga Khan Foundation Canada. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone today, in person and on our webcast, to this event on global citizenship education. When His Highness the Aga Khan and the Prime Minister opened this building, the delegation of the Ismaili Imamate, in 2008, they expressed a joint ambition that the building would be a space for the exchange of ideas, collaboration, and reflection on Canada's role in the world. Aga Khan Foundation Canada has helped to realize this aspiration by convening events and workshops on a variety of topics related to human development, innovative financing for development, maternal and child health, and education. Today's event marks the final event in our series entitled Making the Grade in Global Education. For this event, we are very pleased to partner with the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, and the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. We are excited today to provide the opportunity to learn the latest about global citizenship education and are honored to have Ms. Soo-Hyang Choi here with us representing UNESCO, the lead organization on this topic. We are also very pleased to have two members of the Canadian Commission for UNESCO's Youth Advisory Group, Gabrielle Fayant and Betsy Limebigler. Can I just ask you both to stand up? Just introduce yourselves. They will both be sharing their experiences today as the presentation unfolds. As many of you may know, the international community is in the final stages of negotiating a set of development goals that will build on the accomplishments of the Millennium Development Goals, which expired this year. With the decision point on these new Sustainable Development Goals less than 6 months away, UNESCO and others have worked very hard to ensure that global citizenship education is included in these draft texts. We felt it was therefore very timely to hear from Ms. Choi today about UNESCO's work in this area. Our aim today is to do more of an interactive type of presentation. As such, Ms. Choi has divided her presentation into 3 distinct sections. After each section, we'll be asking Gabrielle and Betsy to share their perspectives and experiences, and also have a bit of an opportunity for an exchange with the audience. In addition, for those of you who are interested in diving a little bit deeper into this topic, we will be having a talkback session starting at 2 o'clock that will provide a smaller environment to exchange with our presenters today about the topic of global citizenship education. That will last around half an hour. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome Soo-Hyang Choi. You all should have received Sue's bio on your chair, so I won't provide all the details of her impressive background and career. But I did want to highlight that Sue has been a long-standing advocate and has a deep commitment to education, early childhood development, and specifically global citizenship education. She has pursued this primarily through a career in UNESCO, where she began working in various capacities since 1997. Through positions at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris, along with field placements in Pakistan and Zimbabwe, Sue has been at the forefront of global efforts to promote the inclusive education, global citizenship education, and education for sustainable development and peace. I would also like to note Sue's connection to Canada. Sue did do her PhD in Alberta, and it is a pleasure to welcome her back to Canadian soil today for this event.
Thank you. Being a small person, whenever I go to a podium, I always have one fear: the podium might just hide, cannot see me. So I would just go around behind the podium. First of all, thank you very much, the Aga Khan Foundation, inviting UNESCO to this meeting. It is a great pleasure to be associated with the Foundation for the topic on global citizenship education. And as Steve said, personally, I'm very, very happy to be back to Canada, where I did all of my, not only PhD, I also did the master's as well at the University of Alberta. So I spent all my 20s here. So I kept on saying that Korea is where my body is from, but Canada is where my heart is, because I spent all my critical 20s here. And even after 30 years, I must say I still remain very, very grateful for the very generous support the country gave me for my study, but also I have a very, very fond memory of all the good time that I had with the Canadian people, whose kindness and friendliness is legendary. Now, as far as my presentation is concerned, it is titled, as you see on the slides and then also your handout, Global Citizenship Education, Background, Status, and UNESCO's Work. So as the title reads, I will go with how this topic has entered the international discourse on education, and what are the issues surrounding the concept, and what UNESCO has been doing in this area. Now, let me just try to flip. Where do I flip? Okay, so if you look at the table of contents under the background, I will look at some of the context which have prepared the emergence, I must say, emergence of global citizenship education. And I will also look at some of the key developments. There were some key momentums related to this area, and some of the milestones that have been reached. And also, this is the best part of my presentation as far as I'm concerned. I would like to share with you what are the emerging trends and messages that we should be able to draw from these developments. So that's the first part of the background, and then we will start, as Steve said, we will receive some questions, and I'll move on to the second part, where I will look at some of the specific issues surrounding the concept, namely the definition issue, measurement issue, and implementing issues. I may not be comprehensive in this short time for the presentation, but I will touch upon some of the key issues. And then I will conclude by sharing what UNESCO has been doing in this area. So that's the overall picture of my presentation. Now, background. Backdrops. The background context. Globalization in trade, globalization in commerce, and ICT advances have made people and populations of different locality being more interconnected, as we all know, also more interdependent, beyond their national borders, beyond their local boundaries. Now, being interconnected and or being interdependent doesn't necessarily make them bond one another immediately with a common destiny, with a common identity. But it does make them be more aware of the impact that they may receive from people that they do not know, and the impact they will make on people that they do not know and they would not likely to know anytime. After all, global citizenship promotes solidarity among people who do not know one another and who are not likely to know. This is an interesting part of the concept. Solidarity among people that you know within a union, within school, within your locality. That's relatively easy, but we are promoting solidarity with people that you do not know and you are not likely to know. Sustainability challenges, I don't need to repeat. We hear from media everywhere, challenges are real, enormous, to the point that our global leaders kept on saying and reminding us that there is no plan B. N'est-ce pas? Plan B for the planet, because there is no planet B. So, not only there is an increased awareness of the fact that we are interconnected, interdependent, but there is an increasing call for actions that need to be done, something about the negative impact, negative results of our being interconnected and interdependent. Global citizenship is empty, it's nothing, if there is no action taken to address the issues that you come to be aware of. So this action part of global citizenship is very, very important, and it is not unrelated to the urgent call that is being made at the global level, especially when it comes to sustainability issues are concerned. Now, global conflicts and tensions among people, among different populations. I'm here being very careful with the choice of the word, among different populations. Continue, and they have been, as we are all aware, have been escalated lately. Terrorism, extremism, radicalization are on the rise at an alarming speed. Now, it is not only the education sector, education stakeholders who call for education for learning to live together. Now it's the political leaders and then coming and demanding, do something about education that can help resolve this issue. Now, within UNESCO, as I will say later, this area of global citizenship education and ESD has been there for some time. And then they have recognized the importance of it, but I must say the member states have not rated this area as the top priority of the organization when it comes to education. But now, with the latest developments, attack here in Ottawa, attack in January in Paris, and then continuing developments that we see every day other parts of the world, now the member states are coming and they are demanding very concretely for education that can teach how to learn to live together. Concretely, this month, next week, from next week on in UNESCO, we're having the spring session of the executive board members meeting. Board members meet twice a year, and this is the spring board. There are already 2 resolutions, very specific, related to global citizenship education and human rights education have been submitted to the upcoming spring board. That really, really shows the attention that political leaders themselves make for this type of education. Now, all these developments and happening, taking place even right now, have prepared the kind of environment where people feel more and more the relevance of such an education called global citizenship education. Now, but there was a very deciding moment for global citizenship education to enter very clearly the international discourse on education. That was in 2012. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he launched an initiative called the Global Education First Initiative, or short stands for GEFI. And it identified 3 priorities, namely access, quality, and global citizenship education. Now, people's first reaction when they saw this list of 3 priorities was just like maybe as you may have reacted. You mean global citizenship education next to access and quality, the primary objectives of education for all or other international global initiatives for the last 20 years? What is the importance of this topic attached to access and quality? As far as the Secretary General was concerned, he was clear what he was talking about. Now, I'd like to share with you the statement that he made when he launched this initiative. He said very clearly, education is much more than an entry to the job market. It has the power to shape a sustainable future and better world. And it should be used to promote peace, mutual respect, and environmental care. For a long time, both in developing world and also developed world, the contribution that education can make to increase individual wealth and prosperity. Not only individual, but individual societies and individual nations' prosperity and well-being has been there for a long time, and we have known about it for a long time. And we have talked about it, we have promoted, we have advocated individual education as a right of individuals, and then education as a means of national economic development. Those are the words that we've been talking about for a long time. Now here, Secretary General and his initiative reminds of us of another kind of a contribution that education can and should make. That is the education's contribution to the well-being of the collective, in the collective society, collective at the global level, of the global community. So now education is responsible for not only for individual well-being, but also the global well-being, global prosperity. This is a different dimension. Now, what are the milestones? In professional discourses, I'll give you some examples. Finally, global citizenship education is being recognized and included as one of the 21st, so-called 21st century skills. You may have heard about the word many times. And global citizenship is very much often included as one of the 21st century skills. OECD, of which PISA work has been known for a long time, with good reputation, OECD is exploring the possibility of including global citizenship education as one of the items to measure and assess the students' learning. Now, I'm being careful here. They are still exploring because there are measurement issues. But the fact that they are looking at the possibility of including this as part of the 21st century, that means something. Now, there is an international coalition, I must say, a network called Learning Metrics Task Force, LMTF, you may have heard about. It is convened by the Brookings Institute in US in partnership with many multilateral organizations like the World Bank, UNICEF, and UNESCO, as well as other professional organizations known in the area of assessment. They have identified the major areas of assessment, the usual suspects, early childhood, primary, secondary, and they have included global citizenship education. So there are, it is a recent development, but very clear development, that professional discourses include recognize global citizenship education, one of the 21st century skills necessary for the students to acquire. In UNESCO, in 2013, the member states approved the global citizenship education as one of the education objectives for the organization to pursue for the 8 years. So now we still have 5 years to go, and this is a very important development. And as you are aware, again, globally at the moment, in the SDG goals that are going to be finalized in September in New York this year, for the education goal, global citizenship education and ESD are being proposed. Again, I'm being careful here with my language. Being proposed because we will only know the fate of this target and other goals only in September. Being proposed as one of the targets for post-2015 education agenda. Now, this is my favorite slide. Okay, there have been all these developments. Okay, global citizenship is recognized as a 21st century, and it is entered in the post-2000 Sustainable Development Goal, education goal. Okay. Now, what are the messages that we need to read in these development? What are the trends that we should be able to identify in these developments? First and foremost, I would like to share with you that surely global education, education community is looking at not only access, quality, and equity issues in education, but they are looking at the content issue now. So it is no longer sufficient to ask whether students are in school, or if they are in school, whether they are learning. There have been the questions that we have. Now the question is, if they are in school, if they are learning anything, what is it they are learning? Some weeks ago, I was in New Delhi. Our Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education for Sustainable Peace and Sustainable Development organized a town hall meeting with the youth participants and also civil society participants as well as government participants. Big meeting, about over 200 people. It's a town hall meeting, so everybody just spoke as they like to. Now the theme of the event was whether education can, this was the language that they used, whether education can wage, like a wage war, wage peace. Now the debate, the conclusion was, education can promote and cannot promote peace. It depends on what kind of education that you are talking about. They said it has to be the right kind of education. Now, what do we mean by right kind of education? That is what we are going to look at. Now, perhaps it is time, so what is implied in all these developments? Perhaps it's time for education that promotes not only individual competitiveness, maybe, but also global solidarity. Maybe this is a time to be concerned about education, not only that you can measure, but that matters. That matters, again, not only for individual well-being, but for the global well-being. It is a time for learning, not only to do and to know, but it's a time to learn how to be and how to live together. So I think these are the, I must just say, the songs that UNESCO have been singing wherever we go, wherever I go, that what are the readings that we got to have from these developments. The language of global citizenship education may change one day. Some years ago, we used to use the word intercultural understanding, or culture of peace, or peace education for a long time, or human rights education for a long time. The language changes, and this may change, who knows? But then the message is still remember. So I think what is important, more than the labels of global citizenship education, is what it means and where we are going, and what are the flavor of the month in terms of our focus and in terms of our attention. And then these are the messages that I would like to share with you. Now, I think before we move on I'd like to give the floor to Steve, see if there are any initial observations about the slides that I have to share with you. I'll be happy to entertain them.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I think we will first turn to our two Youth Advisory Group members. Perhaps, Betsy, I'll start with you. Just based on Sue's presentation, and specifically looking at the challenges or the global backdrop she presented, and also the trends, how do those resonate with what you've been hearing from Canadian youth in your consultations with them?
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Choi, for that introduction. Just to recap again, my name is Betsy Leinbigler, and I was selected in 2013 as the youth delegate at the 8th UNESCO Youth Forum. And the theme of that forum was social inclusion. So I see a huge link between what we're talking about in terms of global citizenship education and the concept of social inclusion. So what myself and the program officer for youth did was we traveled around Canada and held consultations and interviews with young people so that we'd be able to go to this conference and say, not just I believe that young people think this, but we actually talk to young people and this is what they think. And there are some recommendations that we came up with that really resonate with what you've been saying about human rights education and building a culture of peace, which all kind of comes under this umbrella of global citizenship education. And I think that young people in Canada had a really critical eye when it came to identifying who is socially included and what groups are socially excluded. So I think to come to meaningful conclusions about this, thinking critically and incorporating global citizenship education is really imperative for that.
Thanks so much, Betsy. Gabrielle, turning to you, you represent a youth-led organization, Assembly of Seven Generations. How has some of what Sue has mentioned in terms of trends and backdrops reflected in the members of your organization?
So, Ani Bojo, Tansei, everyone. A lot of what Sue is saying definitely resonates with the current context of Indigenous youth in Canada. One thing that I am constantly concerned about is that we continue as Canadians to look abroad, whereas within Canada, First Nations youth actually have $3,000 less to attend school than Canadian youth. So that in itself, right here in this territory, in this country, we are overlooking what's happening here in our own backyards. With that being said, a lot of this global conversation and global solidarity, these are examples that can be led by what the original treaties of this country were signed in. Those treaties resonated the same mutual nation-to-nation dialogue that Sue is talking about. And so a lot of that traditional knowledge is also held within this country. And I do find that our Indigenous people, youth, elders, traditional knowledge keepers have a lot of these answers that we're looking for in the global context. So miigwech chai hai.
Thanks so much. Do we have any interventions from the audience at this time? Any initial questions for Sue or comments based on what Sue has presented for the background to this conversation? Feel free from our web audience as well to make any comments. Aussi, on peut prendre des questions en français si vous voulez. Yeah. Please just introduce yourself as well.
My name's Joy Harrison. I'm here. I'm here representing the Unitarian Go-Go's, which is a group, an offshoot of the Stephen Lewis Foundation, dealing with AIDS in Africa through the Grandmothers Network. And the question that I have to our speaker is, you had mentioned earlier that global education was not a priority, not one of the top priorities of UNESCO. Can you tell us what they were? But if you have planned to do that a little bit later on in your presentation, I can save my question until then. Thanks.
Shall we maybe, if there's maybe one or two more quick ones, we can take those before Sue responds? Anyone else? Yeah, sure. Elias.
Good afternoon. My name is Elias Leon. I'm with the United Nations Association in Canada. I'm a project officer at the Education and Model Assemblies Department. So part of what we know and where we are right now, I think I'd like to raise something very important, which is experiential learning experiences at the global scale. And these can begin, for instance, with Model United Nations associations. There are youth from across the world engaging in global dialogues where they put themselves in situations where they represent foreign policies, write possible resolutions, and this is important as we move forward with a global citizenship education, because if the youth is beginning to think about feasible solutions on how to move forward, it is essential that organizations like UNESCO, different multi-stakeholders, such as the civil society, it's extremely necessary to work as a partnership and innovative ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, I'll turn the floor back to you if you have some initial
Okay.
thoughts.
I will touch upon the question. I think if I understand, if it was not, if global citizenship and ESD were not the priorities, so you are asking what are the priorities. Okay. There are different sets of priorities, depends on which document you did and which references that you go back, but I think maybe I could mention in the overall, the strategy that, for the midterm strategy for 8 years, I think if I am not mistaken, I can remember 3 of them. One of them is teacher issue, and the technical vocational education, and literacy, and I think there is another one which I just slips in my mind. So these are some of the traditional issues, but having these other the priorities actually doesn't contradict our effort to address global citizenship education, because in global citizenship education there are teacher issues, and then so some of them can be corresponding, but these are the other top priorities of UNESCO. Now, going back to the youth issue, absolutely. From the beginning, so far we organized in UNESCO, we organized 3, if I'm not mistaken, 3 major meetings on global citizenship education. From the very, very beginning, we always had a representative of youth groups, and we work very closely, especially the youth advisory group for the Jeffy setup, as you may be aware. Now, In the last, the forum that we organized in January in Paris, the second global forum on global UNESCO forum on global citizenship education, there was a huge delegation, youth delegation, and they came with a strong message, and their message always comes in a very punchy way, and which I like. And then they said at the end of the meeting, nothing about us without us. So that really shows their demand, and I think we should really rightfully respond to their demand. So I think we cannot agree more than you said that it is one of the most important stakeholders. Now within UNESCO, we have a little bit of a division of work, and then I think if you're interested, you might like to Google MGIP, Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education in Peace and Sustainable Development. It is based in New Delhi, MGIEP. And then they are the ones who is going to push global citizenship agenda with youth. So all our youth-related activities on global citizenship education is concentrated on that institute. It's a Category 1 institute of UNESCO.
Great. Thanks so much. I think you can continue with your presentation.
Now, I will touch upon some of the specific issues. As I said, there are many issues, but I think I will just highlight only 3 issues. The first definition issue. What is the issue? The issue is there are too many definitions. Good news about it, they are not too different, but there are many definitions. And why there are many definitions? Because people approach the purposes and objectives or competencies of global citizenship education slightly different. If you go to a meeting on global citizenship education, it's very unlikely that you can come out of the meeting without seeing anyone asking for the definition of global citizenship. And their demand to do something about the definitional issue. Now, we have seen this from our day one with our business on global citizenship education. Now, when I say approach here is our approach. Our approach is this. We may not want to, we may not intend to and plan to develop the definition of global citizenship education that is acceptable to everyone and every member state at the global level. I must say it will be an almost impossible task. If you remember basic education, the key concept of education for all, there is no one D definition that is being accepted by everyone, every member state, even among the agencies working in this area. Different agencies approach differently. Early childhood care and education, I've been working on that for a long time, and then there is still no 1D definition that is accepted by everyone. So we intend not to work a search for the definition that we want to prescribe at the global level. Instead, our approach has been, we focus on the common conceptual dimensions that underpin many, many different definitions and approaches to this area that we have reviewed. We look at over, if not over 50 different definitions and understanding and approaches to this area. And we have identified that there are basically 3 main conceptual dimensions, and these dimensions have a few elements, key elements. So what we have tried to do is we focus on the conceptual common dimensions, and then we would like to allow context within these conceptual dimensions, allow the context-specific definition, operational definitions. Operational definitions means you set up according to your given purpose and then intent. Now, this, if you don't see it, that's fine. I think in the there is a flyer on the table that you can see the detail. I have a prepared one flyer somewhere. Of course, you don't find it when you need it. Here. This that you can find it is all available in Spanish, English, and French. Now, It is titled, What is Global Citizenship Education? But it doesn't say what it is. Instead, it lists up the basic conceptual dimensions, which I said here, 3 dimensions, and it also has a small elements into it. Now, depending on the countries and depending on the context within this conceptual framework, you can pick and choose and combine different elements. You can come up with your own definitions and understanding of it. Different combinations. So that is sort of our approach to the issue of definition. Now, however, I'm in a business, at least as far as this meeting is concerned, I'm in the business of a global citizenship education. So at least I should share with you one operational definition that UNESCO uses when it comes to global citizenship, before global citizenship education, but one global citizenship. Now, I'd like to go over this with you a little bit more in detail, just to highlight what are the main characteristics of the business that we are talking about. One definition that we have, again, this is one that we extracted from our review of many different definitions of global citizenship. Our one operational definition here is, it's a sense. We are in the business of feeling here for a change. Indeed, we are in the business of feeling. We are in the business of experience. And this is something different. And we are allowed to talk about it. We are allowed to talk about it. A sense of belonging, belongingness to the global community and a common humanity with its presumed members. Experience. Again, we are in the business of talking about experience, experiential business. We are talking about something completely different, or rather different. Experiencing solidarity, collective identity, and responsibility. Responsibility to do something about it. Feeling is not enough. Awareness is not enough. You are urged and encouraged and invited to do something about it. As I said at the beginning, without the action, global citizenship education is empty. Now, this is one definition. Now, in another document that you find at the back, it's called outcome document. And you also find a small sort of a booklet which starts with the Korean language, what language that you don't know, but that is it's the same document, and in the back you find the English version of this document. It's the same document, and then this is the result of our first technical consultation, and then you find some other operational definitions that we have about global citizenship and the purposes and objective and the competencies of education. So this is a small document that you can look at, but I would like to highlight that what we have presented here, we do not present it in a prescriptive way. This is one of the many operational definitions that you could look at. But I just want to share with you that at least we have some operational definitions to make our business run more smoothly. Now, measurement issue. What is the issue? Clearly, the issue is, well, you don't have a D definition. You talk about feelings, and you talk about sense, and you talk about experience. Conceptually, it's not tangible. It's conceptually unclear. Therefore, it will be either impossible or difficult to measure. That's the whole issue. I was in Oman, Muscat last year, and there was a big EFA Education for All global meeting. And in that meeting, the member states and the participants proposed global citizenship education and education for sustainable development to become one of the targets for education goal for post-2015. Now, I was in a special session on these two topics, and then I made a presentation about it, and then the reactions from the floor was that, yes, it is important. However, how are you going to measure? So there was a whole skepticism about this target to survive as a target at all, because for after all, target and global monitoring is something that you have to be able to take care of when it becomes a global goal. So there was a whole skepticism about it. Now, our approach here again is that operational definition is possible. Depending on which area of a conceptual framework, which area of a conceptual dimension that you look at, it is possible. Now, here the message that we are sending to our countries as well as other people who came to ask us to demand us the indicator issues, that let's take an inductive approach, not a deductive approach. Deductive approach means that you have a definition first and then you look at the examples. But he would say, well, we know that we have a difficulty coming up with the definition that everybody will agree to. So let's look at concrete questionnaires that existing questions that are being used in the existing surveys. And there are many. And let's look at the questions that can capture most elements of the conceptual dimensions that we have identified. That will have the strongest power to represent and indicate the concept. So instead of working on the D definitions that we will never be able to come up with, we're looking at the questionnaire questions, going inductive. I will share with you in another slide later on the concrete examples of indicators that are being considered at the moment in the global level. So I will just move on to the implementation part, and then I will share with you the concrete indicators that are being considered at the moment. Now, finally, in implementation issues. First, here I said effectiveness of the formal education system being questioned. By all means, global citizenship education is not about learning about global issues or solidarity or sustainability issues. As I said, it is about being responsible, being compassionate, being experiential. Therefore, more and more people said, what can formal education do about your feeling becoming somebody? I know what to do, what kind of information, with the information I know how to deliver the information and knowledge that you may need to acquire and accumulate, but I don't know what I can do about your becoming somebody. So there are more and more people, there is a question about the effectiveness of formal education in addressing these issues. And at the same time, more and more there is an awareness, an agreement that, in fact, families and communities and peers can shed even bigger influence on people on this issue. Not only on this, but sustainable development is the same. Media, social media, I don't need to go into details of the Arab Spring. It's not their understanding of what justice should be, what democracy. It's just that the media, social media has played a big part. Now, balancing local actions with universal. Here the quote and unquote is an important, interesting part. Universal values and values denominators. I must say this snow attracts my attention. You have a beautiful window here, and then we are to be visible, and then what is going on is to be visible to us. And then I haven't seen the snow for a long time, so excuse me for my being distracted to this beautiful view that you intend to provide through this beautiful window here. Balancing local acts. In some societies, the local protocols, local cultural practices are such that they are not necessarily, the students and individuals have a difficulty reconciling their local practices with what we call universal values. You may think from Canada here, yes, universal democracy, human rights, universal, but not necessarily. Therefore, in some areas these days, especially when it comes to human rights, which we all should think it should be the universal, I mean, why there has to be a cultural room for particularity? It's not the case. So, in some cases, people these days prefer the word human dignity rather than human rights. Actually, it should refer to the same. But then when it comes to human rights, there are some societies where it rings a different bell. When we initially launched the global citizenship education within UNESCO, we consulted our colleagues in the field. And then I still remember my colleague in Africa reminded me and advised me be careful about the word global. So in this part of the world, when we use the word global, it is instantly interpreted as Western. Therefore, it is not easy, but at the same time, if we all respect, yes, local, whatever particularity, if we pay attention to particularity, how do we address the universality? Without the values universal denominators, it will be difficult to build a concept such as global citizen. So there is a difficulty of balancing local acts with, in some societies, universal values. Tolerance with transformative action-oriented pedagogy. As I said, without action undertaken to address the issues that have been recognized, global citizenship education is empty. If there is no action, it's empty. Same as education for sustainable development. If there is no action, no matter how much understanding and awareness you have accumulated and acquired, you haven't reached the game. You haven't won the game yet. But to what extent? Imagine a education system, education sector, which is one of the most conservative in many countries, most conservative institution. To what extent did they could allow actions among children, in children? To what extent would they allow children and encourage them to take actions, even if it is responsibly? So there is a little bit of a tension between established institutions and the individuals that they are supposed to prompt for taking actions. How to walk the talk? Again, today I'm talking mostly walk, I'm just doing a little bit of a walk here. But how do we stop talking about it and do something about it? That is the biggest challenge. Having said that, at the country level, we have noticed, we have also collected and compiled some good practices which are already on the ground. At the country level, individual level, community level, there are many good practices. But at the global level, again, still, I think we are on the stage of talk more than walk. So now this is a task that we take upon ourselves, UNESCO. In our next forum that we will organize, we will certainly try to see to this task that remains still to be done. I think that's the end of my slide at this point. Okay, so I will stop here, and then I will see if there are any questions, comments.
Thank you so much. We'll turn over to our youth panel, not that I'm not calling you. Sue's raised some very interesting issues related to the definitional issues, implementation issues, measurement issues. I'm quite interested to hear both your opinions on some of these, specifically the implementation issues that she raised about the efficacy of formal education to address some of the challenges of global citizenship education. So please feel free to comment on that or any others. I'll just maybe start with
Thanks again for that introductory. It was really interesting to hear you talking about the challenges associated with GCED and also reaching a consensus and reaching a definition. Just to draw again back to the Youth Forum in 2013, in preparation for the Youth Forum, there was a lot of difficulty even within Canada when we were interviewing young people around Canada, getting results from interviewing young people in Baie-Comeau, Quebec, in a smaller community. They have a different we got a different set of responses than interviewing a group of young people in Toronto. So reaching a consensus even in Canada, because we have such a diverse population and so many different populations, that was a challenge. So that's not even to mention at the international realm, bringing together and getting a consensus together. So that challenge of reaching a consensus even in Canada, we did manage to narrow down our ideas of what social inclusion is about in Canada and what young people think about that. And one of them that really stuck out to me, because there are some recommendations that deal with art as a really important thing that we should promote, and biosphere reserves are another thing that we should really talk about at the UNESCO Forum. But the ones that really stand out in terms of GCED are three of them that I identified are, number one, valuing alternative forms of education outside, as you had just been saying, just outside of the classroom, informal and non-formal learning, as you'd also mentioned. So that's friendships, what you talk about with your parents, what you talk about in workplaces. Another one was educating communities on inclusiveness with a particular focus on cultural diversity and intercultural communication and dialogue to engage with new immigrants. This was seen as specifically a Canadian issue that the Canadian youth came up with. And the last one, which links, I really think closely with what Gabrielle has been talking about, is facilitating and helping mobilize funding for organizations that do bridge building work through intercultural dialogue and educational programs between northern communities to engage native and non-native communities. So I think that's another challenge that that Gabrielle had mentioned in when she had just spoken, was this challenge of what can we do about it? And when we talk about global citizenship education, what about our own backyard when there are issues? So I think that going back to this concept of acting locally but thinking globally would be that challenge, to find that balance, that we can learn about issues in our own backyard but also think about broader impacts that we have.
Thank you. Those are some really great insights. So yeah, one thing that I did mark is that effectiveness of formal education. And so myself being a Métis woman, Indigenous woman, growing up, I didn't see myself reflected in that education system at all. And so what we've now been doing with A7G and with DOT and with Kairos Canada, we've been doing the blanket exercise. And so that's actually a step that we have to take outside of the formal education system to kind of repair the damages that are being done when we talk about that Indigenous story. So we go through an interactive and learning experience, and we engage people as they play the role of Indigenous people through the last 500 years. So oddly enough, we're actually doing a lot of the things you are talking about as when we're talking about global education and citizenship. But one thing I wanted to mention was that measurement issue. So myself working with DOT, there's a few DOT colleagues here. We do have a lot of measurement tools in place. However, when we do our programming with youth, it's really hard to measure it sometimes because what we do is a lifelong learning education. So it's really similar to, for example, I'd given my cousin in Calgary some tobacco seeds. She was looking to have some really traditional tobacco leaves to have for ceremonies that we do, and that was about 3 years ago. And so I gave her these tobacco seeds, didn't even think about it, but I planted those seeds initially, and just this past month, she told me that those tobacco seeds are going into stalks of tobacco now. And so that's the hard part, is how do we measure that when a lot of our funding streams and funding sources are looking for really quick results, but what we're trying to do is a lifelong learning. It's really, really hard to measure that. So that is a huge, huge issue I also can relate to.
Thank you so much. We are just going to let Sue do the last part of her presentation before we take more questions from the audience, just in the interest of time. So I'll just ask Sue to deliver the final part on UNESCO work.
This is going to be short here. As I said, we have the UNESCO Global Forum series. This is the main major platform that we have, that we organize every 2 years for debate, exchange of information. The first meeting was in 2013 in Bangkok, and the second one just took place in Paris in January, and then drew a huge, huge crowd. We were quite surprised. As you can see in the pictures, in fact, the youth, they figure very strongly. They all looked young. In fact, this here, the lady with UNESCO, the platform, she was the main speaker, the first and the only key speaker that we invited to the opening, and she was the youth representative. So you could see the kind of perspective that we want to address in this area. The second forum will be in 2 years' time, and then we'll be looking for partners and see any of you are interested in joining hands together with UNESCO organizing this. we're welcome for your suggestions and offer. Now, the publication that you see up there, this one was the result of the first meeting, and that we are preparing the report of the second meeting. And I think that if you read the second meeting, so you will see where actually you feel the temperature of the debates and issues and the concerns that people have about this issue. The second report will be uploaded in our website very soon. Second, the work that we are doing, and worthwhile sharing. If you don't see the details, that's fine. I just want to show you the overall chart, the shape of it. We are developing age-specific learning objectives and topics for global citizenship education. Now, this is to serve as a sort of normative pedagogical guide. We are not going to go into in developing countries' curriculum on this issue. We leave it to the member states, or it is the job of the member states. But we're providing some global guidance at the pedagogical level, and then this work is being done, is about to be finalized. It's going to be launched in May in Seoul, Korea for the World Education Forum. But this is going to be a very important pedagogical guidelines that can guide people, and not only the policymakers, but individual students and teachers, and then teacher trainers as well. Now, again, if you don't see the details, that's fine. We just want to show how it looks. We have a clearinghouse on global citizenship education house in Apseo, Asia Pacific Center for International Understanding. It is a Category 2 UNESCO center based in Seoul, Korea, which is a big partner to our work in global citizenship education, and they have just opened the first the phase of the clearinghouse. If you do have a very important and interesting materials and references on global citizenship education, please contact us, and we'll be happy to load them in our website. Now, the final. We are supporting, naturally, UNESCO being the leader for education goal on the post-2015, and my division responsible for both global citizenship education and ESD. We are following up on our work for the SDG in September, and then we are supporting the UNESCO's work on indicators. Now, here, as I said, at the moment, this is exactly what is happening. At the moment, there are different sets of indicators being considered for this target on global citizenship education and ESD. And here I presented one set of indicators that have been proposed by, there is a technical group set up to look at the individual, the indicator issues of education goal. So it's a very technical statisticians, and these are some of the examples that they are looking at. Now, I would like to share with you another set of indicators, 3, but not too different from this. So you will have a feel of what is being considered. But this one is more general, because these indicators that I list up here on the slide are the ones that are being already used in some of the existing survey tools. So they are very specific. But here there are some indicative indicators we can look at, and this is one being considered within UNESCO for the education goal. Now, I will just quickly go over. It says, you will see how, this is rather more general, but it's not unrelated to the indicators that you see on the slide. How many countries have make sufficient efforts to introduce education for sustainable development and global citizenship education in their curricula? This is not too difficult to measure. I mean, if you can come up with a kind of operational definition is how it is being reflected. So the second indicator is how many children and adolescents acquired a sufficient level of knowledge on sustainable development and global citizenship education over time. Now, sufficient may be a little bit difficult to measure, but I think if you have a baseline and then have an operational definition, this is not impossible to measure. Now, the third the indicator being considered is how many young people and adults adopt values and attitudes favorable to sustainable development and global citizenship education over time. Again, once you set a baseline, then you come up with the operational definition, you should be able to measure. So these are the thinking being done at the moment. Okay? Now, let me go, as I said, but we are looking at, with the partnership of IEA, International Association for Evaluation of Educational Achievement, IEA, we are looking at all existing survey tools and try to extract the items related to global citizenship education and ESD, and looking at see if there are any questions that can cover as much as possible the conceptual dimensions that we have, I have presented earlier. So the work is still being done. Contact us if you have any ideas to share. Please, these are the sites, and then the website is also available in French, and the clearinghouse is going to be available also in different languages. Tweet us and contact us through the Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. We do have a few minutes left for some questions from the audience. I will not go specifically back to Betsy and Gabrielle, but please do feel free to speak up if you have any more comments. And then, of course, people are welcome to stay afterwards for a more intimate talk-back session. So, and I think we have some questions from the web as well. So maybe I'll turn over to Sarah, who will ask some webcast questions.
Thanks so much, Steve. So we had a lot of really great questions coming from the webcast, and unfortunately I can't ask all of them, and I doubt you'll even have time to answer all the ones I'm asking Sue, but I'm going to put them out there anyway. I think there's some great food for thought. So first we have one from Mir Khan. He says a large segment of world population is rural. Religious traditions which are deeply rooted in rural cultures play a critical role in youth vision formation. What role, if any, do these traditions play to promote global citizenship education? So that's the first one. Next we have a question from Jared Penner from the Child and Youth Finance International. He is wondering if Ms. Choi could please speak about the learning framework for global citizenship education, and particularly the economic dimension, including financial responsibility, sustainable livelihoods, economic rights, all
Can
those.
you repeat the question again?
Yeah, could you please speak about the learning framework for global citizenship education, particularly the economic dimension, so anything related to financial responsibility, sustainable livelihoods, and economic rights? Let's see, take her notes. Next we have a question from Eladio. Eladio asks, are there examples of countries who have taken a lead on the issue of global citizenship education and preliminary results of this work? And is this push coming from more developed or developing countries to put in place global citizenship education? Okay, last one I promise, but this is a good one. And I think it's relevant to a lot of people in the room. So what can non-governmental organizations active in education do in order to advance the global citizenship education agenda, both internationally and at the local and national level? Thank you.
So, great. Sue, feel free to answer part or any of those questions. They're a pretty hefty set of questions.
Okay, I think I will start with something rather simple about the examples. Examples are indeed, in fact, quite many. And then I think we are, in the report that we are putting up together for the second forum, there are actually many examples. Now, the examples coming interestingly, not only for developed countries, but also from developing, not only from developing countries, but also for developed countries. For example, UK has done a lot of good work, especially from the immigration perspective. And then some of these countries who have to handle the immigration issues, and then how to integrate them, and then how to make them become the newcomers to become part of the society. So there are a lot of good examples being done with the UK, and then also Sweden, and then some of the Nordic countries, and then how to make them to live, learning to live together, not only for the newcomers, but also for the existing populations as well. UNRWA. the UN agency for the Palestinian people, and then their population, their students living in a conflict zone. So their whole education system has been tuned and programmed to address these issues. So make them be more aware of the tension. I mean, they're living in an environment where the tensions actually are felt on a daily basis. And then make them feel free to talk about it. And I think this is an important point. To make them, give them a room for dialogue, and also train the teachers to be more aware of these issues. So UNRWA, if you check the UNRWA website, you will find a lot of good examples. So there are quite good examples that we could do. NGOs, like any stakeholders in the society, it's not that there are a particular role that NGO can do or a particular role that the others can do, but NGOs working on in this area, especially the civic education. Now there are not too many NGOs working on global citizenship as such, but there are many NGOs working in civic education or non-discrimination or human rights issues, and they're all relevant, they have a role to play. Now, I'm not quite sure if I understood the question again, the financial implication of the learning framework for the global citizenship education. I don't know what that could have been. Steve, if you could rephrase the question. Now, I'm just
to the next one, perhaps.
I'm throwing the ball to you. About the rural populations. Now, I think our colleague here said something already what I would have said. We've been talking about that the actions have to take place, and of course we are not talking about that you individually doing something globally. Everyone has their own levels. We said, as you said, act locally, but think globally. Now, that applies to every population, including the rural population, even the indigenous populations, any populations. So I think the message that I wanted to get across for every group of populations and different people is to act locally, think globally. So that will be one the panacea that I could provide to all different groups in terms of how they can engage themselves in global citizenship.
Good. Thank you so much. I do want to be conscious of people's time. We did say the session would end at 2, and it's past 2. So I think I will close the formal session of the meeting now. As I mentioned earlier, if you are interested in staying around and discussing further, we have Sue here for another 30 minutes for a more intimate talk-back discussion, so please do stay around. But I will be closing the official webcast portion of the session now. I would like to thank everyone for coming to participate both in person and online. And I'm very happy that we were able to close our education series with such an interesting discussion today with Soo Choi and with Gabrielle and Betsy as well. I would ask everyone to come, if you could take a moment please to fill out the survey, which either should be on your chair or perhaps on the way out the door. We do highly value the input that we get from our participants on these events, and we do take your feedback into very serious consideration. I would also just like to make sure that everyone is invited to come on April 22nd to the launch of the Together exhibit. This is an exhibit that Aga Khan Foundation Canada is launching in partnership with the Government of Canada on global development. It will be a mobile exhibit that will eventually travel across most of Canada, but we will be having the launch here on April 22nd at 5 p.m., and please do come. So thank you all very much, and if you are staying around for the talk back session, please feel free to move up.